Show, don't tell. This is common advice given to writers about how they should be showing in their writing instead of telling. And just like most advice for writers, it's not all that helpful. It's like that advice oracles give in movies and stories where it makes no sense in the moment, and it's not until later when the protagonist has already figured out everything that it actually makes any sense. So over the last 8 months, we've had over 100 students go through our writing workshops and actually written scenes and turned them in and gotten feedback. And there's nothing like having to stare into the eyes of students and try to explain this to them that will actually force you to learn how to explain it. And so I've gotten really good at helping writers overcome the propensity to tell and really understand what it means to show in their writing. And I'm going to share all of that with you right now in this video. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand what show versus tell really means and how to make sure you're showing in your writing instead of telling. So let's just start with the definition. Showing is description of what is observable. And the two most important words in that are description and observable. So we're taking what can actually be observed in the world and we're describing it. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, well, that's not any more helpful than just telling me to show instead of tell. And you're absolutely right. I'm going to explain what this means in a lot of detail, but I'm going to keep coming back to this definition. So once you understand it, this is what I want you to hold in your head. Showing is description of what is observable. So let's talk about that second word first. What do I mean by observable? What does that mean? We're going to look at how we perceive things, how you and I actually perceive the world around us, and we're going to split it into two groups. And I came up with really fancy names for these groups, Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1, we're going to call this green. And green is our senses. Our hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching. And then group 2 is our feelings and our thoughts. So we have senses in group 1, that's the 5 senses. And then group 2, we have all of our feelings and thoughts. Now group 1 is all about the objective things that are objectively happening. And then our feelings and thoughts go in the subjective category. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. So let's say I pick up my water bottle here and I turn around and I just slam it into my bookcase. My books fall down, Legos go everywhere. And later I go to each of you that watch this video and I interview you and I say, what did I do? 100% of you will agree that I picked up my water bottle, I turned around, and I slammed it into my bookcase. You picked that up with your senses, what you could see and what you could hear. And that is something that I objectively did. Now, how you feel about that and what you think about that becomes very subjective. That depends on what you think of me, your experience with me in the past. People like me. It might have made you afraid. You might have thought it was funny. You might have thought I was losing my mind. So while 100% of you would agree that objectively I picked up my water bottle and I slammed it against the bookcase, you all would start having different thoughts and feelings about that because those are subjective. So now let's take this a little further and look at how this actually works in the real world. So whenever two people are interacting, so you're interacting with somebody else, or even really we're interacting on this video, we're only interacting on the green level. We're only interacting using our senses based on what we can see, what we can hear, what we can smell, what we can touch, and what we can taste. That is how we interact with the world. We do not interact with the world on the feelings and thoughts level. I can't interact with you on the feelings and thoughts level. My wife and I have been married for over 21 years, and yet I can't crack her head open and see for sure what she's feeling and thinking. When we're interacting, I'm watching her, I'm listening to her, I'm paying attention to her movements, and then I'm inferring her thoughts and her feelings. And then she's doing the same thing to me. She's taking how I'm acting, what she can see, what she can hear, all of that, and she's inferring my thoughts and feelings. This is how the world works. You can never know for sure what people are thinking and feeling. Even if they tell you, you don't necessarily know for sure that they're telling you the truth. So you're still just watching and listening, and you're using all of your thoughts and feelings and how you've interacted with people in the past and you're inferring their thoughts and feelings. So we can never know what the other person is thinking and feeling. We're taking what they're doing, what they're objectively doing in front of us. We're mapping on our own thoughts and feelings and inferring their thoughts and feelings. This is how the world works. And here's the thing. We're really good at it. We've been doing this since we were a little tiny baby, where we're constantly watching the people around us and we're trying to guess at what they're thinking and feeling so that we'll be safe in the world, we have good relationships, we are in our social circles, our tribe takes care of us and we can take care of them. We're really good at seeing what people are doing and inferring their thoughts and feelings. And so let's go back to my definition of showing. Showing is description of what is observable. So here's what I'm telling you. To keep your writing showing instead of telling, you're going to just write down the green. Write down what you can pick up with your 5 senses, and that is it. So let's imagine you walk into a coffee shop and you go up to the counter and you look at the barista. Right? We've probably all been in this situation. How will you know what's going on with that barista? How will you know if she's stressed? How will you know if he's happy? How will you know if he hates his job or she loves her job? How do you know if she's bored? How do you know she actually cares about you, the customer, or doesn't care about you, the customer? Obviously, you're not cracking open their head and seeing their thoughts and feelings. You're taking what they're doing and you're inferring that. If they're rolling their eyes a lot, if they're staring at their phone, you kind of think they don't care. If they're smiling at you, they're engaging in you, they're asking you questions, they're saying good morning in the right kind of way, then you know that they actually care. So when you're trying to get down on the page what the characters in your story are actually feeling and what they're experiencing, just write down what you can see and hear and experience through the senses, just like you do in real life. This allows the reader to infer the thoughts and the feelings of the characters themselves because they're really good at it. So here's a little trick I use for my own writing and that I teach my students as well. So let's imagine we're at a diner in real life and we see these 2 people at the diner and we see them interacting. How will we know what's going on? We've all done this. We've been at a restaurant and we see a couple that seems like they're fighting or seems like they're in love. And we can just tell by their motions and how they're interacting. We can't even hear what they're saying. And so what I want you to do when you write your next scene is pretend like you're just a ghost in the scene and you're just watching what's happening and reporting what's happening. You can't know for sure what the man is thinking or the woman is thinking. You're just describing what you're seeing. You're describing what can be observed. That's the only thing you're allowed to put on the page, and you have to put it on the page where the reader can understand what's going on. Now, this does not mean you're just passively describing what's going on like some sort of news reporter that doesn't have an opinion. Of course, as an author, your opinion should go on the page. And at this point, you may be wondering, okay, you're telling me I'm only allowed to describe what is actually happening, what's actually observably, objectively happening, and yet I'm supposed to get my opinion on the page as the author? How am I supposed to do that? Now, I have 2 videos that go deep into this. It's all about how to use nouns, verbs, and descriptors, and how to valence your language. There are 2 videos. The links are down in the description. You're going to want to go through those deeper after this video, but I'm going to give you a quick version of what I teach in that. So let's imagine I'm driving home and a person cuts me off in traffic. This objectively happened. Anybody that was there would have seen that a person cut me off in traffic. So now I get home and I'm telling my wife what happened. And I'm just going to replace those first 2 words, a person. And I'm going to replace them with some asshole. So I come in the door and my wife's like, "How's your day?" And I say, "Some asshole cut me off in traffic." Now, objectively, that's what happened. A person cut me off in traffic, but I picked a noun that gave my opinion of how the whole thing went down by saying some asshole cut me off in traffic. Now, what if I replaced a person with, instead of saying some asshole, I said this poor old lady? So I come in the door, my wife asks me about my day, and I say, this poor old lady cut me off in traffic. Well, I am still describing objectively the exact same thing, and yet it has 2 completely different tones to what actually went down. This is how you put your opinion on the page while still just describing what you observed. So let's go over a few examples I've pulled from books. "You can call me DeWitt easy," the white man said. "I could tell by his handshake that this guy was up to no good." So here I am, not showing you what's going on. This is telling. I could tell by his handshake that this guy was up to no good. So here I am telling you what I think you should think about this white man that I just shook the hand of. This is the actual line from Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley. "You can call me DeWitt easy," the white man said. "His grip was strong but slithery, like a snake coiling around my hand." So here, the author is just describing how the handshake felt, but he did it in a way so the reader knows what he thinks about this man without having to directly say what he thinks about this man. All right, let's look at another one. "Jack smiled wide, trying to impress Ullman." So again, we're just telling the reader why Jack smiled, right? We're not letting the reader see Jack smile and then infer why he's doing the smiling. That's what we need to do. Just say what we saw and let the reader figure out whether or not he's trying to impress Ullman. Here's the actual line from The Shining by Stephen King. "Jack smiled, a big, wide PR smile." So that's just describing what he observed, but now you know what Jack is doing when he's smiling. He's faking it so he can impress this guy. Let's look at a third example. "Prospero the Enchanter is not happy to meet his daughter." So here we are just describing what the character is feeling and not letting the reader infer that on their own. So this is the exact line from The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern. "Prospero the Enchanter's immediate reaction upon meeting his daughter is a simple declaration of, well, fuck." So now we know the same thing, that Prospero the Enchanter is not excited to meet his daughter, but the author didn't tell me that. They just described what they saw. They described what they observed, and we picked up as the reader what was actually going on. So when you're writing your book or you're writing your next scene, make sure you focus on just describing what you can observe as the narrator, whether it's in first person or third person or whatever. You're just describing what can be observed, and you're letting the reader infer the thoughts and the feelings of the characters and everything that's happening in the scene. Now, at this point, I inevitably get the question, well, what about what's going on in the characters' heads? Can't we go up in the characters' heads? What about memories or imaginations or sharing what a character is thinking? Are we never allowed to do that? And of course you are, but this is going into the characters' heads, and this is where it can get a little weird, but I'm always going to keep coming back to describing what is observed. So let's just step through this a little bit. Now, the caveat here is to always remember your job as the storyteller is to constantly keep moving the story forward. Your reader wants to know what happens next, and so whenever you're dropping into your characters' heads, make sure it's serving moving the story forward. But of course, that is a part of telling a story. So how do you do that? Well, once again, we're going to focus on the green, only what can be picked up by the senses, and we're going to describe what can be observed, but how does that work? So let's address how we do this for the past, the present, and the future. So let's start with the past. So if we go into the memory of one of your characters, so we're dropping into their head, they're remembering something that happened, and we're going to put that on the page. Well, you're still just going to describe what can be observed. Instead of now you being the author or some other character being the author, whoever's character you're in the head of, that is now the author, and they are the person that is describing what is observed. Now, if you've been writing in first person, that's relatively straightforward. If you're in third person and you drop into a memory of a character, you have to tell it as if it's the character telling what happened. They're still describing what is observed. You still have to follow all the same rules. If you want to see this in action by a master writer, go look at Breathing Lessons by Ann Tyler. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a fantastic book. And there's huge sections of the book where the main character is remembering things that happened, so we go into the past. But what you'll notice, if you pay attention, is it's being described this exact same way, where it's only describing what can be observed. The character is using her five senses and describing what can be observed, and she's using her language to help you decide how you should feel about that. But you, the reader, still have to infer the thoughts and the feelings of the characters because she's just describing what happened. So when we look at memories, it's the exact same way as if they were happening in real time and you're just describing what is happening. Now, if we go into the future, it's still the same thing. We're still going to paint a picture for our reader, describe what we can observe, and let them infer. So I'm going to show you a short clip from another Ann Tyler book called Accidental Tourist. This is from the 3rd chapter of The Accidental Tourist. And right here is where I want you to pay attention. This is where Macon, the main character and the protagonist of this scene, is having a conversation with his estranged wife on the phone, and he's trying to reconnect with her. And at this point, he jumps into the future and starts imagining what it will be like when she comes over to the house. She would stop by for the rug and he'd invite her in. He'd offer her a glass of sherry. They would sit on the couch with their sherry and he would say, "Sarah, have you missed me?" Or no, he'd say, "I've missed you, Sarah." She would say, and then she said, "I thought I'd drop over Saturday morning," and we're back into the present because she started talking again on the phone and interrupted his thoughts. But you'll notice he's not saying, "Oh, she'll come over and we'll reconnect and fall back in love." No, he's painting a picture, then just describing what's being observed. She would stop by, he would invite her in, they'd have a glass of sherry. So once again, we're just describing what can be observed. Can you see the pattern here where we're just painting a picture of what's actually happening and describing it for the reader and letting them infer, like in this case, that Macon wants to reconnect with his wife. So now what about in the present sense? What if we go into the thoughts of the character in the present? If we want to show that our character is really upset about something and we want to show what she's thinking about right then. So let's look at an example of that. Sarah was so mad at John because he left his stuff everywhere like usual, causing her to trip over it. So once again, we didn't show what happened in this line. We just said what Sarah was thinking and why she was thinking it. We explained it instead of showed it. So here's another version of that. She thought of the previous morning when the doorbell rang and she had lurched out of bed. She took her first groggy step, slipped on John's dirty underwear, and crashed to the floor, slamming her head into his pile of half-empty Miller Lights from the night before. So once again, did not say she was mad, did not say what she was thinking, did not explain any of her thoughts or feelings, but you as the reader feel the rage of what that must have felt like to have that happen to you. So once again, it lets the reader infer the thoughts and feelings because the author just described what was observed. So I keep coming back to this idea of just create a picture and then describe what is being observed. So whether it's a memory or something we're imagining in the future or something that's happening right now in the head or outside the head, we show what's happening, we just observe what's happening, and we describe what's happening. But there are times where that doesn't quite work. We do want to show the reader what the characters are feeling, and it's not as simple as just describing what is being observed. And this is where we use figurative language like similes, analogies, metaphors, and we still paint a picture and then describe what is being observed. So don't tell the reader that your character is feeling stress. Say your character feels as if they're carrying a semi-truck on their shoulders. This gets the same thing across to the reader, but it lets the reader decide what that feels like. You're just painting a picture and describing it. So this is why figurative language is so common in great writing, because it's painting a picture and letting you, the reader, decide how to think and feel about that thing. So whenever you can, just describe what's being observed. If you need something extra, use figurative language. So we've covered how to do this, but what is the real problem with telling? Why is telling bad writing, and why is it something you should stay away from 99% of the time? First of all, it doesn't feel real. Remember that how we all interact is we observe things and then we infer the thoughts and feelings of other people. That is, no matter how long you've known somebody, that is still how we all interact. And so when you do that on behalf of your characters, you just tell the reader what everybody's thinking and feeling constantly, it doesn't feel real. That is not how real life works. The second and worst thing is that you're robbing from the reader the ability to co-create the story. This is what's so great about writing, is we're co-creating the story with the reader. So we're showing them what's happening, describing it, and letting the reader create all the back-end thoughts and feelings themselves. And this is how they fall in love with your writing. Now, why don't writers do this? Why is this something that writers tend to fall to the telling instead of the showing? Well, first and foremost, it's just a skill thing. You're not very good at it yet. That's what I see over and over is this is really hard to do. This took me years to figure out how to do. Lots and lots of practice, lots and lots of feedback from experts showing me, oh, you're still telling there, you're still telling there. It's a skill. So for most people, just like most people can't swing a bat and hit a home run, it's a skill that you have to build over a long period of time. So the number one thing is skill. And then the number two thing is there's these moments where we as writers get nervous that the reader won't know what we mean. And so we just tell them. And we're like, well, maybe my writing's not good enough, so we just tell them. And I see this even in published books happening a lot where there's this moment where I already know what's going on because the writer's really good and I understand. And then the writer gets a little nervous and they just drop in some telling to make sure you understand exactly what's going on. But by far, the number one thing that causes this is just a lack of skill. And this is what we teach in our workshops. This is why I'm doing this video, to help you understand how to do this. So I've got some rules of thumb for you that should help you along your way as you're trying to put this into practice. First, force yourself to describe what you, the narrator, whether first or third person, can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and that's it. See if you can write a whole scene with only this. If you do this, your writing will immediately get way better. Number two, if you want to convey an emotion and you can't do it by straight describing the observable, use figurative language to create something observable and then describe that. Again, analogies, similes, metaphors. Number three, when you are rereading a draft of your writing, be on the lookout for anything that is not describing what is observable, even if it's in the character's head. I'm not saying you're never, ever, ever allowed to have any of this red and blue on the page, but it should be a very, very tiny portion of your writing. And if you want to get better at this, practice putting no thoughts and feelings on the page and sticking to describing what is observable. And I'll just mention here, this is really hard to catch on your own. You think you're doing it, and then somebody else can look at your writing that actually knows what they're doing, and they'll still find telling in there. And so this is why we run the workshops where you get one-on-one feedback, where each week you turn in a scene, we look at it, we tell you what you did right, what you did wrong, and how to get better, and then you write another scene. So if you want to find out more about our workshops, that's down in the description. If you're wondering who I am, my name is Tim Grahl. I'm the CEO of StoryGrid, and I'm the author of The Threshing, Running Down a Dream, and Your First 1,000 Copies. My partner, Shawn Coyne, is the creator and founder of StoryGrid, and everything we teach on this video and this channel and at StoryGrid is based on his 30-plus years writing, editing, and researching. If you want to keep going on this whole showing versus telling thing, I've got the next video you should absolutely watch, and that's going to pop up on your screen shortly. If you want to dig deeper into StoryGrid, go to storygrid.com, check out all the free resources we have available there. Sign up for the newsletter because that's where we send out the latest and greatest stuff. But as always, thanks for being a writer. Thanks for being a part of our community here at StoryGrid, and I'll see you next time.